Welcome to Extra Takes, hosted by Northland Church Senior Pastor, Dr. Joshua Laxton. Join us each week as Pastor Josh reveals the rest of the story behind his sermons. We'll discuss how those who follow Christ can live out a biblical vision for the church in our world today.
Well, hello, Northland family and friends. Welcome to another episode of Extra Takes. I'm your co-host, PJ, along with Matt Shiles. Happy Wednesday, even though it's Monday for us.
I was very confused for a second. Oh, wait, it's Wednesday? No, it is. Happy Wednesday to everybody.
Yes, because this is when it releases.
But what if they listen on Thursday?
Well, happy Thursday, happy Friday, happy Saturday, happy whenever you listen to this.
Yeah, be all things, all people.
I don't know if that's kind of what Paul was really getting at.
Is that not right?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
I did tell you right before we was about to go on air that, man, my brain is really cloudy this morning.
Well, it's funny because I feel a little the same. So
we'll get through. We'll get through this
together.
Absolutely. Well, so welcome. We're in week 2 of our series, Word to the Wannabe Wise. I just like the series title.
It's fun to say.
It is fun to say.
Word to the Wannabe Wise.
Yeah, because we want to be wise.
We do. And this week is wisdom and wealth.
Yeah, that was fun. I told a few people this. All right, so I wrote this message. So this is the backstory, okay? So I actually wrote this message in 2020.
Oh.
So
really?
I was where I was a teaching pastor at. We were in a series in Proverbs, and so I was handed the topic of wealth, money, and so I'm talking about I labored over that message. I mean, I probably put over 30 hours into this message because that's where I wrote down every verse. But the week prior to me preaching it, I got COVID.
Really?
So I got the OC, the original COVID. So this was in the very beginning of August, 2020.
So you didn't preach it?
So I didn't preach it. And so I set on, because I actually thought I had put so much work into it.
Wow.
And I never got to preach it.
Wow.
And so I ended up just kind of putting it on my website because I felt like, I actually thought that this is a treasure trove, a wealth of information in terms of what Proverbs had to say about wealth. And so I never got to preach it. And so I got to preach it this week for the very first time.
That's awesome. Well, actually, that was my first question was why this topic. So I'd love to
Well, money is, why this topic is money is so important. Yeah. Money is one of those issues that we really do want to know what the Bible has to say, hopefully in a safe way. Yeah. And I hope people didn't feel like, they were shamed. I mean, listen, I even shared that Joni and I, we're still trying to figure this out. And it goes back to the fact that the Bible, like Jesus does not shame us. Now, does he want to bring conviction? Yeah. So there's constant conviction that I do have in this realm. I mean, it's not an easy realm, and especially in today's society, where I do believe that people want to be generous. People want to handle their finances well, and then sometimes life happens, and just the cost of living, and there's just so many factors that go into it. And so I don't want you to feel beat up by this message, but obviously it's such an important topic, not only just in the realm of the world, like economy, like it was the number one issue. And that's why I wanted to I gave those definitions. Like I wanted people to see that what we see in the realm of Proverbs as it discusses money, it's way beyond just money. It truly is economy. And it is how do I generate money? How do I look at money? How do I spend money? And that's really the general definition of economy, a system of how money is made and used within a particular country or region. So there is such a thing called the economy of God. Yeah. So how do we? And so that's what I wanted to really unpack and give people a framework of God's economy, because it's the number one issue in our culture today. Yeah. It was the number one issue of who they were going to pick as a president based upon the economy. And so we need to know those things. So that's why I wanted to do that topic.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And the main point we had was a wealth of wisdom makes you wise towards wealth. And what we did was you laid out 3 big questions. We'll go through those. And it was, how do you view money? Second was, how do you generate money? Under that, we talked about society streams of income, Proverbs streams of income, and then 7 principles from those. And then the third question was, how do you steward money? And then that's where you finish with this idea of how Americans steward money, and then how Proverbs tells us to steward money. So
Yeah.
it was a lot there.
It was a wealth of wisdom.
It was.
Yeah. Well, and that's why, I mean, even to go back to, that's where whenever we do a series on stewardship, like, yes, we'll go deeper into topics, but I wanted, I mean, again, this is word to the wannabe wise. Here's a word on finances, some wisdom, a wealth of wisdom on finances. And so if you were interested in an area of, let's say how I view money, and you wanted to really understand how money is not the priority, hey, listen, dive into that. There's a lot of passages that really talk about that element. And then in terms of how you generate, like there's a lot there that you could explore. Like, am I hungry? And we'll get into that. But I'm saying, like, it wasn't meant to be. It was meant to be exhaustive in terms of a breadth or width. It wasn't meant to be, kind of exhaustive in depth, because I'm giving you just kind of the framework. Again, I was giving you everything that Solomon had to say about money in these 3 big buckets. Because I think sometimes it's really helpful to zoom out sometimes. Like, it's almost like me preaching from a biblical theological worldview of constantly going back to Genesis, right? I'm trying to we're zooming in on a passage, but I want to zoom out to kind of put it in context. So what this message was really is to zoom out, of Proverbs, not just look in one, passage and dig into that, but let's zoom out in a book and look at I think it was like 85 different verses in just the book of Proverbs having to speak towards money.
So you said you developed this in 2020, and you've also said, a sermon's not done till it's done. Did you make any tweaks to that as you kind of revisited?
Well, it was funny because I had to make some tweaks because some numbers changed in terms of the average debt for Americans. It went up in 4 years. I mean,
I'm sure it did.
Yeah. So I had to adjust that. But as I was looking at it, I mean, in all honesty, I was like, wow, Lord, you really gave me a good word 4 years ago. I mean, like, sometimes I am. I am not lying. There's times where I'll go back and look at something that I wrote, and I'm like, man, that wasn't me.
That's awesome.
That was. I mean, I just thought, like, man, that was just to break it down the way. Yeah, I mean, that's Jesus. So I'm like, that's why I do try to tell people, anything good comes from me. It does not come from me. It comes from the Lord.
Yeah.
And so as I was looking back over it, I'm like, this. I mean, and again, I'm not tooting my own horn, but I'm like, I thought it was a really good way of breaking it down.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So you said you wrote down every verse by hand.
Yeah.
Was that this time or before?
Before. Yeah, I would not have had time. Like, so this is where God, when I wrote it, obviously I wrote it for Northland because I never preached it. But I would not have had 30 hours to do what I did. And I'm like, so, yeah.
So talk about that process of going through and writing them all down.
Yeah, I wish I would have brought my notebook at that time with me. I mean, it's in my. I always store my notebooks when I finish, and so I wish I would have brought it. But I mean, yeah, how I did it is I would write down every verse by hand, and then you start looking for patterns. And the patterns of, okay, well, this is about this topic, and then I color coded them, and then then I took the color codes and then I put them under these buckets, which is why, like, I think the Digging Deeper study that Barb does every week, she's like, I don't know how you were going to get in. And I'm like, well, I wasn't. And but she put a lot of those verses in there under the points. And so that's how I did it. Wrote them all down. I started to look for patterns. I would kind of chart the patterns, and then I would color code them. I mean, so it was when I say it was a laborious process, but again, this is part of where I love the study of God's Word. I want to look for patterns. I want to look for what is the way. How do you unpack it? How do you share it with people in a way that's extremely meaningful? And then I also got to use kind of the creative elements of how do you create pithy, kind of catchy principles rooted in these proverbs.
Yeah. Well, and there is something about slowing down enough to write out verses. It really helps you meditate on them in a different way.
Well, and here's another thing that I did, if people noticed, but there were like letters after each verse, like NLT, NIV, MSG, because I wanted to find kind of a translation that really unpacked that because sometimes Proverbs, if you have the English Standard Version or the New King James Version or the Christian Standard Version or the New International Version, they may say it in a different way. And so I wanted to kind of use a translation that was really getting at the essence, because sometimes a translation, particularly when it comes to Proverbs, if it is a word-for-word translation, it might not make as much sense, and you have to do a little background study. Sure. Where some are a thought for thought, and some are even more of a commentary way of saying it, like the one that I used talking about children being a pirate. Yeah. That was from the Message, because it was more of a commentary, and so it just helped me, again, when you're putting together this amount of information at once, it's hard to, so that's why I wanted to make sure I used a translation that was going to hurry up and get at the essence of what it was saying versus me trying to have to unpack what it was saying.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So I used a lot of different versions. Again, they were all from the Bible, but they were different versions.
And that's a little different than what you normally do.
Right. Normally I just use the NIV.
Yeah.
Because again, this goes back to when I came here, Northland was using the NIV. I probably would have went to the Christian Standard Version, but what's the difference? Not much. So, I mean, really not much. So, sure, if you want to get technical, sure, there's some differences, but at the end of the day, I'm going to do deep dives into word studies, commentary, all of that. So, it really didn't matter which translation I was going to use. Yeah. So, I just stuck with the NIV.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. So, so this first big question, how do you view money? Money is power, money is protection, money is popularity, money is privilege, money is pretentious, money is proud, and you get to money is not the priority. So what you weren't saying there is that we should view money in all of those first 6 ways, right? But
so I'll even try to clarify. It's not that I'm saying it's okay if you see money as that.
Okay.
But that's not the point of money. Like, so for instance, money is power. Okay, power, I love what Andy Crouch talks about in his book, and I forget the title of it, but it's about power. Is that power is actually neutral, but what he would explain power as is it's what you make of the world. And so if you're making a world that you're using money as power in a way to glorify God for the good of others, then in some sense, okay, money is power, but you're using that power in a way as more of this steward, because you understand that money is not the point, that God is the point, but you're using money as power in a way to glorify God for the good of others. But because here's the thing, Solomon knew this. The rich rule over the poor. Yeah. Okay, so he's making a statement, he's making a principled statement that for the history of mankind, I mean, you can look at the Bible, you can look at history, typically those. I mean, again, this is a general principle. The rich will rule over the poor. And so, and again, he's not making, well, you don't need to be rich. That's not what he's saying. But if you're if you're zeroing in on that money is power and that you want money so that you can have power, that's not the point. And that's what Proverbs, and is also what he's trying to say. So what I'm really wanting, what I really wanted people to see though is that there were all of these passages and scripture verses in Proverbs that talk about how people view money. But at the end, if you start though with those viewpoints about money, you will end in a very you will end in an unhealthy position. You do need to start with that money is not the point. But I think that it's still important to understand these principles that Solomon outlined of how people view money. Like money is protection. So the wealth of the rich is their fortified city, but poverty is the ruin of the poor. Okay, but here's the thing. All right, so let's go through this. Let's unpack it a little bit more. So if I understand that money is not the point, that God's the point, but I also understand that money is protection. And I have money, that God has blessed me with money, and money's not the point, then guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to use my money to protect others. Sure. I'm going to use my money to help elevate the poor. I'm going to help my money to help protect the homeless. I'm going to give them a shelter, because the poverty, the ruin of the poor, they can't even build a shelter.
Sure.
For themselves. But can I leverage my money, because money's not the point, even though it's protecting me, but I'm going to use it because God's the point. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that's where these come in.
Yeah. So it's important that we don't see all these as just pitfalls, right? But we can see all of these as opportunities to, we can redeem them to be used for God's glory, and not for our own selfish desires and as we do.
Absolutely. And because if we understand that God is the point and that money is a tool, now we're going to use the tool to actually reflect the point.
Yeah, for him, yeah.
And that's where you look at these views and go, okay, well, money can be used to protect. Money, when in some sense can be used for popularity, but am I pointing people to the Lord, or am I pointing people to how much they ought to love me? Right? So you look at money as privilege. Are you using? I mean, this is the question that we ought to ask as believers. If God's given us money, and if you make and that number is probably even more now, but if you make over, let's just say $63,000, even in combined, you're in the top 0.17% of the wealth in the world. And so I know that doesn't feel that way in America, but you are in somewhat of a privileged position. If you even have a car, you have to understand that most people in the world do not even own a car. That is a privileged position, and so a person's riches may ransom their life, but the poor cannot respond to threatening rebukes. And so those are just things that you just want to keep in mind about how am I, and again, then that goes to that third point, stewarding money. Yeah. But this is, again, how people can view money, but don't view money like that, because money is not the point.
Yeah, so let's look at that second question. How do you generate money? Those 7 streams of income. Where'd you pull that from?
Of how
Society, 7 streams of income.
The 7 streams of income, where I pulled it from. Let's see if I have my link here.
I was wondering if it was something that you had pulled from one source, or if it was just kind of a collaboration.
It was a collaboration.
Yeah.
I don't have.
Well, what I found interesting with that was how different Proverbs laid out those 7 streams, and you even made a point about Proverbs 7 streams of how they'll lay out loan, gambling, stealing, bribery. That those still exist today, but we wouldn't see those. We wouldn't count those.
People don't count them. Yeah. So. I mean, when I just typed in streams of income, 7 different types of income streams, it just pulls it up: earned, profit, interest, dividend, rental, capital gains, royalty.
There you go. Right there, yeah.
How to create multiple streams of income. 5 income sources. I mean, so there's various, and so again, they're looking at how you generate in kind of more of a legal manner, where Proverbs is going to talk about how people and again, those are still part of very much our culture,
right?
But we don't see them as generating, in some sense, income.
Yeah. It's so fascinating. So from that, you took those 7 streams of income from society, the 7 streams of income from Proverbs, and then you came up with these 7 principles.
Yeah.
From those 7 ways.
Yeah.
those principles were fascinating. So let's start out by just asking, especially since you did this before, were there any of these principles that kind of jumped out at you this time, or maybe you feel were more important, or?
I mean, because they're all different. They're all different, except the first two. I mean, they're similar, but they're nuanced.
Sure.
I think for me, probably the one to two that really kind of stand out is methods matter, because that's where I talked about children, and I want my children to realize, like, we don't ask you to do a lot. And so if you're going to, in some sense, be living off of our money, and you don't want to contribute to just the functionality of the household, then you really are. There is some kind of element of robbery that Proverbs would say.
Yeah.
What's wrong with that? There's quite a few things wrong with that, actually, in God's eyes. I mean, first of all, if we've asked you to do something and you don't want to do it, then there's a lack of honor. And then we're going to give you an allowance. We're going to pay for, in some sense, not just your needs, but your wants, and you don't want to do it. And so, okay, come on now. We're trying to teach you responsibility.
Yeah, there's an opportunity for that dependency to happen.
Yeah.
And that can be pretty common with kids, and that can be a hard transition, for teenagers as they're trying to launch, to change that, because that dynamic has been the giver-receiver relationship.
Yeah.
And what you're trying to do is shift them. That one stood out to me too. The methods matter in terms of how our ethics should separate us. How we live and how there are very much, some of these streams of income that we may say, no,
right,
because we're just not going to go there. That comes up often in terms of, get rich quick schemes, and just the idea of if it's too good to be true, it almost always is.
Yeah.
And that's something that we've wrestled with as we, just in the last couple of years. Kaylee and I, we look around. Hey, are we doing something wrong as we're seeing friends and acquaintances and others doing things? But at the end of the day, sometimes the methods aren't the way that we're called to in this. And at the heart of it was the desire to get rich quick, the desire to circumvent the process. I just have affirmed that one because God really honors when we're faithful in those methods.
I think so. I definitely think that he's very faithful, benevolent to us following his methods of generating. Yeah. Because he talks about there's other, and I read quite a few of them, but wealth created by a lying tongue is a vanishing mist and a deadly trap. One who oppresses the poor to increase his wealth, and one who gives gifts to the rich, both come to poverty. But here's the thing: why would you give gifts to the rich? Popularity. Because money is popularity. So if I give gifts, if I give gifts, I love going to see Jim. Man, he gives the best gifts. And so it's kind of like, well, they don't really need your gift. The poor actually need your gift. So you're giving gift to the wrong. And so. Whoever increases wealth by taking interest or profit from the poor amasses it for another who will be kind to the poor. And that happens in our society. There are people that prey on the vulnerable, those who send spam emails and text messages to the seniors, because we have that as an issue, and we have many seniors here that, man, can you help teach us? And so people are making money in ways that are very dishonest, and that's where the Lord detests dishonest scales, but accurate weights He finds favor with. So So those are things that we have to keep in mind as believers, is like, how are you making money? Like, so for instance, if you have, like as a senior pastor, I have a church credit card. Mm-hmm. Like, am I using that credit card wisely? Am I using it in a way that is a good steward? Because I know that there are people that can abuse church credit cards. And so they might buy a meal, and in some sense, because hey, that's $15 I ain't got to spend. So, but I hope and pray that I don't do that. And the only one who sometimes would even know would be the Lord. And so that's where we have to really pay attention to how are we generating money, because that is a form of generating money. Like, and I even said this, is that if you're an hourly employee, but you're cheating by kind of inflating the hours that you work, that's generating income by stealing. Yeah. You're stealing you're stealing from the company, because you're saying that you worked 9 hours when you only really worked 8. Yeah. And so God cares about those things.
Yeah, and what I loved about, I can't quite remember which part it was in, but when you talked about what was it, the least trusted professions?
Oh,
and you talked about used car salesmen. And yeah, like you said, the fascinating part is we have several used car salesmen in our congregation. What an incredible opportunity for them. Yeah. Right? To separate themselves from culture. Yeah. To show that, hey, this is a profession that people are used to, people lying, and I'm not going to do that. Yeah. Right? I'm going to be above board. I'm not going to allow, especially if you're managing or if you own it, I'm not going to allow my staff to do that. Like, what an opportunity. Yeah. You see how believers can really influence culture in that way, and separate ourselves especially in an area like this where we are such a materialistic, consumeristic society. Money is so near and dear to our hearts. Yeah. It's got a hold on us so much, so many of us. And it's a really, really important topic that I think this week, because it was so broad, it had an opportunity. I mean, every single one of us should have been affected by this. Not every aspect, right? But because of how broad it was, all of us, because we all have a responsibility. Yeah. Like you said, we are privileged in our personal finances, and then in our jobs, and we all have opportunities to manage well. And as believers, we really have a chance to set ourselves apart from culture in a lot of these ways.
We do. Yeah. Yeah. I'll go back to there was a statement that a commentator made in his commentary on the Proverbs 28:24 about anyone who robs father and mother and says, "So what's wrong with that?" is worse than a pirate. Another version just says, "Whoever robs his father or his mother and says, 'That is no transgression,' is a companion to a man who destroys." And so here's what the commentator said: defrauding parents is perhaps the utmost and antisocial behavior for the sake of money, since no institution is more fundamental or honored in wisdom than parenthood. Wow. The word for robs could be rendered plunders, and him who destroys is someone who causes havoc in society. Mm-hmm. So if you look at it, and this is where I did say, because it's like every gathering, I think people clapped, at this part, and that's why at the 11 o'clock I said, let's not clap. I have my kids in here, and also there's a lot more Gen Z in the 11 o'clock. Yeah. But what is true, though, because I did say, and I think I said it at all of them, but the reason why Gen Z feels so entitled, it's the parents' fault.
And you noticed there weren't clapping?
I mean, like
it was silent when you said that.
Yeah, it's like we cultivated that. And the reason why I even bring this up is about him who destroys is someone who causes havoc in society. I'm telling you, there is havoc in society. Mm-hmm. And again, I'm not saying that the younger millennials or Gen Z is lazy, and I think they're passionate about things in life. But when it comes to this idea of making money, when it comes to this idea that methods matter when making money, I think it's really important for us to see what's the havoc that is being created, or that has been created, has been because we've entitled them, because we've given them an allowance without even asking them to do anything. We've just, in some sense, allowed them to think that they are entitled to every want that they could imagine. And so and this has been the pattern, is that parents have created more of a child-centered home versus a value-centered home. And I wouldn't even say parent-centered, but a value-centered, mission-oriented, kingdom-oriented center where it doesn't revolve around even the parents, and it doesn't revolve around the kids. It revolves around the glory of King Jesus. And but what's happened, though, is the havoc in our culture with a younger generation that feels like they ought to, be able to work 20 hours but make that of a 40-hour work week. That's been cultivated because they've done very little in the home to contribute to the home. And they're like, well, hey, listen, I got everything that I wanted, my home, and I contributed very little. I ought to be able to do that now. What? No. Like, anyone who robs father and mother and says, hey, what's wrong with that? You're plundering. You're robbing. You're stealing because you're not contributing. And so I think it's okay for us to ask our kids to contribute. I think it's okay to ground them. I think it's okay to withhold allowances. You're trying to teach them dignity. You're trying to teach them contribution. You're trying to teach them to invest in and even what they would make as. And again, I'm not saying when it comes to meeting their needs, like in some sense you withhold food from them because they won't clean. But I'm not telling you to starve your kids. I'm telling you let's in the why. And this is the thing: wise living. In a discerning, wise way, let's teach them about the value of money and contribution.
Well, we're seeing that now, even with Kate at 6. She'll get money for birthdays or whatever, right? She'll do some chores and she'll get money, and she'll save up, and buy something, and then she'll want to save up, and she'll say, well, we'll say, well, yeah, if you want to buy that, you can save up. Well, why don't you just buy it for me? It's a sweet deal, right? If we're going to buy it, then she can use her money for something else. Yeah. Right? Yeah. But, the opportunity that we have to instill in them early, hey, there's 3 buckets, and these buckets have gotten down to 1 recently, but you save, you give, you spend, right? Yeah. You give to God, you save for later, and then you spend on, at this point it's on her, their wants, not their needs, because we provide their needs. But over time you see that those 3 jars, that now there's just 1 jar, right? And they're just putting all of it into the spend jar. So we've seen it as an opportunity to really help. I think part of it is just to see how they're wired and see if they're a natural saver, a natural spender, how do they view money, what type of attachment does it have for them? I mean, one of our kids can go to the store and just pick things out. I want this, this, and this, and let's go. And then the other, it's a battle. There's a desire for more. So, we're just starting to get there and scratch the surface. But you can see all of this played out with them, even that young. Yeah. Let's see what others of the principles do I want to talk about. I like number 1. I like the money monster. What I like about that is the imagery of just feeding the monster, and you're so right. I mean, you feed that thing and it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. It just seems like the more you spend, the easier it is to spend.
Yeah. So in Proverbs 7, this is fascinating. In Proverbs 7, 19 through 20, it's in the context of adultery. Here's what the woman says to this simple, naive, basically foolish man. So the woman says to this foolish man, "For my husband is not home." He's away on a long trip. He has taken a wallet full of money with him and won't return until later this month. So we don't know what he's doing with the money, but undoubtedly, they are well off, the woman and her husband. And by the context, this seems to have been a regular occurrence that he's kind of gone off with a wallet, kind of a wad or a wallet full of money. And so she seems to be upset, a neglected housewife. It seems like she's now in this manner of acting out. And so she searches for a little side fund and seduces a younger man. And so all of that, what was, and I didn't say that in the message, but I had it in my notes because it is this idea of, all right, so hungering for more money feeds the money monster and it eats away at your life. And how many marriages, whether it's a workaholic man or a workaholic woman that's constantly working, making money, and in some sense outspending it or using it in a lavish way, the other spouse feels neglected, and as a result begins to feel their boredom with something else. And so I can tell you in our cultural context that happens so much. Is that you have these families that kind of in some sense have this lavish lifestyle, and the person's out, the spouse is out making money or spending it, having fun, always on business trips, this and that, and then at home there's some boredom happening. And so they're going to try to find you, and they're going to try to fill their boredom, and the root cause. I mean, again, I'm not saying that there's not other causes, but there seems to be a root cause. Even in Proverbs 7, there's this wad full of money.
Yeah.
And so hungering for more money feeds the money monster and eats away at your life. And so if you're not careful, money can eat away at your time. It can eat away at your own health. I mean, those who are workaholics and burn the candle at both ends, and they don't get the sleep that they need. They don't get the physical attention, in generating good health. They don't give the attention that their health needs. I mean, so it erodes their health, it erodes their time, it erodes their marriage, it erodes their relationship with their kid. I mean, so that's why, it will, if you feed it, it will turn into a monster. And that's where Jesus would say you cannot serve the money master and the creator master. Yeah. You can't do both.
Well, and then that seventh point, money is made in the short term, wealth is made in the long term. I mean, that's wisdom too.
Yeah, and that was the one that really stands out to me right now, because and this goes back to, there's nothing wrong with generating wealth. Mm-hmm. And that's why I wanted to kind of show in a couple of different verses on point 3 is that you have the ants that store up. Yeah. And so there's nothing wrong with generating wealth. But again, what's the point of you generating wealth? Is the point of you generating wealth so that you can have those 6 things, or is the point of you generating wealth so that you can pass on something to the church, to the kingdom, to your grandchildren? What's the point? Mm-hmm. And so for me at 42 right now, I'm trying to go, okay, Lord, how can I be wise with this and to do those 4 things that we did talk about under point 3, which we'll get at here in a second. But how do I generate wealth, especially in a day and age where when we moved and the cost of housing was here? Praise the Lord that we had created some equity in the 3 years that we spent in Illinois, that we were able to get to a manageable mortgage. But even then, the cost of housing here, I'm mouth open, oh my gosh. And especially when we moved in 2022 and everybody was bidding for these same houses, and people were giving $50,000, $60,000, $75,000 above the asking price. I'm like, is that wise? I mean, so we're living in a day and age where I understand the cost of living, the cost, which includes the cost of housing. You have insurance, and then all the bills go up. I mean, the water bill, it constantly goes up. The power bill constantly goes up. In some sense, gas prices. I mean, that kind of fluctuates, but it goes up, it goes down. It's just hard. And so how do you Like, okay, you make money in the short term, but you know that if you want to generate wealth in the long term, all of what comes in can't all go out. And so and then what buckets do I put it in? And so,
and that's where that's where I hadn't made this connection before, but that's where, wisdom is really connected to wealth in terms of long-term wealth, because imagine trying to get wisdom in the short term. Imagine trying to get wisdom quick.
Yeah.
Right? It ain't going to be wisdom, right? The only way to get wisdom is like wealth, little by little by little by little by little over the long term. Little by little by little by little, it doesn't feel like you're doing much. Same with saving for retirement, etc. All of that. A lot of times it's just set it aside little by little by little. That's how we can kind of see wealth. That's why these proverbs are so valuable. These little pearls of wisdom that we just get little by little by little, that we can then implement. We turn around and look back at our life and say, hey, man, we're making more wise decisions than we were 5 years ago, 10 years ago.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen necessarily quick.
And it doesn't. And I was talking to someone afterwards, and again, there could be a temptation to feel shame and guilt, like especially if you're even in your 40s like me, or definitely 50s, 60s, 70s, and you're like, I didn't do any of that. So here's the thing. There's grace. God's still good, and he's not shaming you. He doesn't want to smite you. Yeah. But and maybe 30 years ago, you didn't even know the Lord. And so then this might be where you start passing on wisdom to other people, helping them understand. I don't know, but again, it wasn't meant to bring shame or guilt or condemnation. I think even for me, like in someone in their 40s, like, hey, listen, I'm not living up to all of these yet. And so, but hopefully little by little, I'm bringing this area more under the rule and reign of God in His economy. Yeah. And that we're making decisions today. I didn't share this, but I mean, one of the reasons why, all right, so I know that some people see that I like shoes. So I do. I like shoes, and I try not to spend full price on shoes, and I do have a good selection of shoes. But I also have chosen not to spend my money on expensive jeans, expensive pants, expensive shirts, because so again, this is part of where, for me, when it comes to how I live out frugal living, is that I've chosen to go, hey, I really do like this. And again, I believe with all of my heart, God does. He's not sitting there going, oh, I can't believe you spent money on shoes. Because I don't believe He's sitting up there judging. Because again, He looks at, how are we living? Are we doing this? Are we giving generously? Are we saving measurably? Are we investing, intentionally? And then are we living frugally? And so for me, I've in some sense in my own personal life now, will there be a conviction at some point? Maybe, I don't know, where God's like, I don't want you to spend any more money on shoes. Okay, all right. And am I open to that? Yeah. But again, when I buy clothes, I had it's funny, I can tell you when I wear a button-down shirt, because people be like, you dressed up today. But a couple of things about this, and seriously, this is how I think, and you don't have to agree with it, but this is part of the personal convictions in the gray areas. This is called wisdom living. It's practical living of bringing out the functionality and flourishing of how we relate, create, and operate. Okay, so I really like the button-down shirt I had on. It's actually my favorite button-down shirt. Okay. But I bought it when it was on clearance, and it was less than $20. And this was a couple of years ago. I bought it when it was on clearance because it is normally somewhere around $60, $70. I don't feel comfortable spending $60, $70, for a shirt. I just don't. And again, but if you do, do it. Like if like so, but I don't. And so, but then also think about like if I wore that kind of shirt every single day and I had to dry clean it. Well, then now that's $3 a shirt that I have to, which is why when I look at, I actually in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, what I wear and how much it costs, not only to purchase it, but the wear, if I wore it all the time, what the wear is I'm going to get out, and then even how much it would cost to get it dry cleaned every day. Well, some of you, well, you can throw it in the wash. Well, no, I want it. Like I'm very particular. Like I don't really like wrinkles, And then, am I going to iron it, or am I going to ask my wife who works to iron it? I'm not going to ask her to iron that. So all of that goes into my daily, weekly, monthly, yearly decisions on just what I wear. And then the ultimate, thing too of, also what I wear, like what I wear is I want people, I want it to be able to reach up, and I also want it to be able to reach down in the sense of, I don't want to feel like I'm dressing in such a way that people feel like I'm I'm unaccessible. But I don't want to, kind of dress in such a way that I'm unaccessible. And so I'm thinking, I'm trying to. Again, maybe some of you're like, you don't even buy it. Well, you don't have to buy it. I'm telling you, this is how I think deeply, even about my clothes. And now, ultimately, this is what, and I've shared this before, but like just my shoes. Years ago, I actually dismissed it, but I had a pastor that if you want to in some sense be able to connect with the younger generation, if you bought some Jordans, or if you bought some cool shoes that they would deem cool, that gives you an instant connection with them. I dismissed it. Then I bought a pair.
It's a real thing. And
it's a real thing.
Yeah.
And so the investment, and again, you don't have to agree with it. I'm telling you this in the extra take setting because this actually goes into by investing in these shoes, I'm able to establish a connection. I actually have teenagers that come up to me that in some sense really like Pastor Josh because I have cool shoes, and they'll listen to me. And so there's an element to how are you investing how are you investing your money in just a stylistic way from clothing and shoes. Yeah,
it really is missional. It's a missional choice because the other thing that it does is then when you can actually speak intelligibly, if that's a word, when kids wear certain shoes, like there's this instant connection. I mean, I've done that with teenagers, college age, and there we have something.
Yeah. And that's where we're working on, and I don't think I know I haven't shared this, but we're working on how to create our own clothing brand, where we can actually begin to create the wear that we have.
Well, and I think that what's important about this is because we're talking about money, and then it goes into missional, which obviously that you're thinking about that. For you, it might not be shoes. For you, it might be, I don't know.
It might be a boat. Hey, because again, God's not out. He's not. What I'm trying to think of, he doesn't. Well, I don't want to say care. Care is not the right word. So I'm kind of fumbling here because he does care, obviously, how we spend our money. But if you use money for a boat or use money for a beach house, he's not going, oh my gosh, that's sinful. No, but how are you using it? How are you thinking about it? Because we have a lot of generous people here at Northland that they do own beach houses, and then they are giving it away. Sure. But also it's a way also for them to use it as an investment. So they generate money from it so that they can give more money. I mean, so there's a way, and again, that goes back to the economy of God. Yeah. Of when you look at how do you view your money, How do you generate your money? Because you might invest in your boat, but it might be a missional thing. It might be a way that you take Sabbaths, where like, man, on Saturdays, man, I go and I'm on my boat because it's a way for me to relax. It's a way for me truly to rest. Okay, so that's where you're, and that's why I wanted to show. There was a way that I actually wanted to show. Let's see if I can show it. But what I really wanted to do is kind of overlap of relate, create, and operate, but how money is also in the middle. Yeah. Because money is used to how we relate to people. Money is used of how we create, generate, consume, and it's how we operate. It's how we steward and manage. So that's why I did put at least money in the center here of how Proverbs tells us to manage it, because how we give generously, it's how we relate to God and others. How we save measurably can also be how we relate to God and others. How we invest intentionally, especially if we're supposed to invest in a way that we're able to pass off something to our grandchildren.
Sure.
And then living frugally, that is the operation, the management, the stewardship of how we're living frugally, not lavishly. So this is where Tim Keller, and I really appreciated his teaching on Proverbs and wealth and wisdom. And if you have an increase in lifestyle doesn't necessarily, or an increase in salary doesn't necessarily mean you have an increase in cost. Like I'm going to go immediately go and buy a bigger house, immediately go and buy the luxury car that I want.
That's countercultural.
So, but you're still going to live frugally.
Yeah. Well, and we were talking about using money missionally. Not every purchase we have, obviously, is going to be used missionally, but I think that those are great examples of how we can really think deeply about how are we using the resources that we have to glorify God and to honor God. And certainly we all have opportunities to grow. We all have opportunities to probably pat ourselves on the back a bit and say, hey, this is the way that I'm doing it. I would encourage us to look at the areas where we do have some wins, because it's most likely not all negative, but certainly there's opportunities that we can continue to say, Lord, how do I continue to use these resources and put them under your lordship, to use them in a way that honors and glorifies you. I'm glad you have that up, because I want to jump to that. But
a couple of things. Let's look at this is how Americans, most American. This is the average American of how they view managing and stewarding their finances.
And this is that third question: how do you steward money? Yeah.
So Proverbs 21:17 and 20 says this: "Those who love pleasure become poor. Those who love wine and luxury will never be rich. The wise have wealth and luxury, but fools spend whatever they get." That's what Proverbs 21:17 through 20 says. Yeah. So when you look at the majority of Americans, the vast majority of U.S. residents rank comfortably some of the wealthiest in the world, comparatively. Yeah. That's where if you have a median household income of over $63,000, your family is in the top 0.17% of richest people in the world, and that is from sportofmoney.com. How rich are Americans on a global scale? They're very rich. But when you look at us, though, we are living, 80% of us are living paycheck to paycheck. And just so that you know, I mean, like there is an element. I mean, we're all, in some sense on the cusp in terms of living paycheck to paycheck. But I mean, like Joni and I, we're not where we want to be. We have not been able to save 3 to 6 months of our savings yet to cover our expenses. So I just want you to know, again, I'm in this with you, and And I'm hoping and praying by God's grace and the Spirit's power in us that over the next couple of years that we're able to get to this. But and I hope, and this is where I'm like, and this is where I have to look at it. Is it because I love pleasure? Is it because I love luxury? What is it? Is it the cost of living? So I'm having to be discerning and let the Lord speak into my life and bring conviction where needed. But when you look at kind of living lavishly, okay, what is lavish? Well, I mean, I think it might look different for different people, but at the end of the day, you have to look: is your lavish infringing upon your ability to save? Is your lavishness infringing upon your ability to give? Right, like. So those are, that's what you have to determine is that is your lavishness affecting these other areas? Yeah.
Well, and that figure, paycheck to paycheck, 80%, man, that's high. I think that went up because that used to be like 40 or 60%. But that's a huge.
Let's see if it's
number.
Changed any, because I did leave the science of generosity. I wanted to get to that. So let's see, percentage of.
This is live, folks.
Percentage of Americans living paycheck. Here we go. AI's generating. So it may have, so April 22, 2024. Let's see, April 9th. Here's.
It's a big number regardless. And
more than 1 in 3 say they are living paycheck to paycheck. Nearly 6 in 10 Americans are uncomfortable with their level of emergency savings. It is interesting. The average American feels they need to earn over $186,000 to live comfortably. Okay. So, yeah.
Well, and that really just speaks to that.
So this one is from CNBC, and it says that 65%, this is in 2024. Now, again, this was in 2020. So this, but a majority of 65 say they live paycheck to paycheck. So,
yeah, it's
interesting.
It's a really fascinating study when you try to mix money and wealth with wisdom, because you connect. We are some of the richest people in the world, and there's such a hold on us, right? This is an area, believers, we have such an opportunity.
Yeah.
There's such an opportunity for God to transform us in this way. And as we do that, I mean, Dave Ramsey would say, you're going to look weird. You're going to do stuff that's weird, right?
Yeah.
Culture.
Yeah.
We should be used to that, not just with money, but in our life. We're going to be doing things that set us apart.
Yeah.
We do that with money, and it is going to be obvious. It's going to be obvious.
Yeah. So, like, investing unintentionally, this is what I meant by that, is that, most Americans, I do believe, kind of unintentionally invest in their future. I mean, they pay into their Social Security or their pension as part of their financial structure at their job. I mean, and they may also opt to pay a little extra into a 401k. Mm-hmm. But a CNBC article in 2019 was titled, 75% of Americans are winging it when it comes to their financial future. And then even most Americans decline any financial help or advice. And so that's kind of where I get this investment of this unintentional investment into their future. I mean, it's this unintentional. I mean, they got Social Security. They're paying a little bit extra into their 401k, but they haven't really sat down and planned out their future of what is my goal. Mm-hmm. When I'm 60, when I'm 70, So that's what I was really getting at there.
Mm. Yeah, and then obviously we have what Proverbs tells us. And, it's always so helpful when we see the way we are doing it and the way the the world is doing it versus what biblical principles are. Again, there's no condemnation here, but I think the biblical principles just help to highlight for us the opportunities. So this idea of giving generously, saving measurably, investing intentionally, and living frugally.
Yeah, listen to some of these verses about giving generously. Honor the Lord with your wealth, with the first fruits of all your crops. Then your barns will be filled to overflowing, and your vats will brim over with new wine. Proverbs 11 says, give freely and become more wealthy. Be stingy and lose everything. The generous will prosper. Those who refresh others will themselves be refreshed. Proverbs 19, whoever is kind to the poor lends to the Lord. Blessed are those who are generous because they feed the poor. Those who give to the poor will lack nothing, but those who close their eyes to them receive many curses. So a couple of things. This is interesting. When you just look at the science of generosity, this is larger culture. Okay. When you look at the science of generosity, here's what we read. The science of generosity suggests that humans are biologically predisposed to be generous. Like, I do believe, and this is where I do even think Americans want to be generous, but because they're unwise. Because I'm unwise.
Too many barriers. Yeah.
And that acts of kindness can have a number of positive effects for both the giver and the recipient. So, one, reward pathways. When you give to someone, your brain's reward centers are activated. Feel-good chemicals. Giving to others can increase the production of dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin, which can make you feel good. Psychological health. Generosity is associated with better psychological health and well-being. Physical health. Giving social support such as time, effort, or goods is associated with better overall health in older adults. Life satisfaction. Volunteering is associated with high levels of overall satisfaction. Depression. Giving may help alleviate depression. Contagious. A single act of kindness can inspire more acts of generosity. And then generosity is a key factor for a happy marriage. So the University of Notre Dame has an initiative called the Science of Generosity that includes a research project and an international funding competition for scientific research on generosity.
Oh, man.
So, I mean, there's been a lot of science done in recent years over this idea of giving generously. And yes, of your time, your talents, but even your treasures, your money, your wealth. And I had a mentor say that you never get the way he kind of said it is that you never miss what you give away. You never miss what you give away. And then he would also go to say when you give to the Lord and His church, it makes a difference. When you don't give to the Lord and to His church, it makes a difference. And so. And just so that you know, like what you give here, and I didn't have an opportunity, obviously your tithe, but your tithe here goes into what we refer to as the mission of God, of how we're partnering with the mission of God here. And the way we partner with the mission of God is that we connect with others and the Lord. We cultivate disciples and leaders. We care for people and resources, and we're commissioned to neighbors and nations. So every dollar of your tithe goes into those 4 C's. Yep. And you can also even look at those 4 C's broken down this way, is that your tithe goes to people, because people reach people. So about 47% of the tithe goes to investing in our staff. And then you look at facilities, facilitate, ministry, and mission. So there's a huge cost. Almost 30% of the tithe actually goes to operations. And you have to understand that what we run today is not what Northland ran in the day that this building was built. But basically, we have a facility that in some sense is oversized to our current attendance levels and giving levels, but nevertheless, we're choosing to see our building as a blessing. Yep. And what we're also trying to do too, just so that you know, is we're trying to be a better steward and manager of our facilities, which is why we're now leveraging our property in a way that is what we call a benevolent owner. That's why we have a partnership with the Ecclesial School Initiative, but they lease from us, so it helps offset some of that operation cost. Mercy Road, even though we own it, and it's operated, but by giving it the kind of structure we've given it, like they're having their very first fundraiser luncheon this week, and so they already have pledges from the outside community up to about $250,000 already. But what we're hoping and praying for is that as they become more sustainable in terms of finances, that they're able to contribute also to the wear and tear of our property. So again, we're better stewards of our facilities, and so we just want to be a benevolent owner and a wise steward with our facilities. Even though they do consume a lot of our resources. So your tithe goes to people, goes to facilities, it goes to resources. Resources resource the church, and so all of the various little things here and there, from computers and systems and other things like copiers and all of that, resources resource the church. And then last but not least, missions is the mandate of the church. And so we give around 7 right now, just to our partners. That doesn't include everybody in missions, but just to our partners, we give about 7% of the tithe we give to mission partners, local and abroad. And so that's kind of how your tithe is broken down. And then we also have various opportunities throughout the year to give above and beyond. You've heard that before, to capital improvements above and beyond. If you were here a year and a half, almost 2 years ago, we did Raise the Roof. And so that was initiatives around here that was above the tithe. So it wasn't in the budget, but it was above and beyond. And so those are offerings that we have. And so we will have an offering coming up to help fund Mercy Road once again, because they are doing a lot to meet mercy needs in the Central Florida. And so we want to help them kind of pour fuel on their fire to make them more sustainable quicker, because anything that they're over on, it actually comes out of the surplus. And so right now, nothing, by God's grace, there's been nothing that has come out of the surplus, in this fiscal year. So we're grateful for that. And so we want to help them more and more so that they can become more sustainable, because the quicker they can become more sustainable, the better they are going to be to help us care well for the facilities here. So anyways, just wanted to share like how when you give generously, your first fruits, that's what it goes to. And so
that's a great overview. Great summary.
And the last thing I'll say, because I know we're kind of at time right now, but invest intentionally. I had a little acronym that I wanted to share about investing. So S is sit down with a financial advisor. And if you need some recommendations, we would love to recommend somebody to you. We have CFR. We have a couple other partners that would fit that bill of being a financial advisor. Then execute a plan. So in some sense, as you sit down with a financial advisor, you're going to come up with a plan. You need to execute that plan. And then the second E is, even if it's a little, set it aside. Even if it's a little, set it aside. So sit down with a financial advisor. You're gonna execute a plan, and even if it's a little, you're gonna set it aside. And then D is you're gonna diversify your investments as you get older. You're gonna diversify your investments as you get older, and that's something that, and again, that's a seed. So the whole idea is that if you plant a little seed, and it's gonna take a while for that seed to take root and to grow. But if you think about investing intentionally as a seed, I'm gonna sit down with someone who knows what they're talking about, who can give me some wisdom. Then I'm gonna execute a plan, and even if it's a little, and this is where we're trying to tell our kids, this is where I'm like, I know somebody sat down with me when I was in my 20s, and I stopped when I got married because we were poor. But if we would have just kept giving $10 or $100, and so I'm like, but now I'm like 42. Lord willing, I got, next 30 years, can I do something now? And so even if it's a little, set it aside. I can't even stress. Like now I'm like, but then diversify your investments. So, okay, you have your Social Security. Maybe you have your 401k. What else can I diversify? But your financial advisor will help you with that. So plant the seed now.
I like it.
And but you're going to have to live frugally. So if you do these three, then whatever you have left, okay, so live frugally. And then that's where Proverbs 13:7 says, one person pretends to be rich, yet has nothing. Another pretends to be poor, yet has great wealth. Proverbs 16, better is little with righteousness than vast revenues without justice. And just remember this, wisdom is practically living out God's image and likeness in how we humans relate, create, and operate. So we're living out, this is what we're called to do when it comes to wisdom, when it comes to wealth. We're called to live out the economy of God, of how we see money, of how we generate money, and how we steward money. And so Northland, family and friends, thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Extra Takes. We'll see you this weekend as we tackle wisdom regarding friends and friendship. Okay. So I'm looking forward to that.
Awesome.
Blessings.
Thanks for listening to Extra Takes. Be sure to follow us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts so you won't miss a single episode.